We can all tell that the Minnesota Vikings defense is night and day with and without Blake Cashman. But, why? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to my hashtag everydayers. Those of you who make Locked On Vikings your first listen each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today on the show, it's finally we don't have like a big piece of news or something on Wednesday. We can just talk some ball. We're going to talk some ball. We're going to get deep today. Here's the plan. I do want to go into the offensive struggles a lot, but I want to start with this Cashman thing. So Blake Cashman's been out for 3 weeks. He comes back against the Jaguars, and the Vikings defense picks right back up. Now, I think that they had kind of fixed some of their issues against the Colts. I mean, it was also a very ailing Colts offense. So in that game, the Colts had some of the problems that just have nothing to do with the Vikings. They just fell apart, and you just get to kind of have a bunch of good plays for free. I don't think the Jaguars offense, the Mac Jones offense had its issues, was quite on that level. And you could tell the one drive that the Jaguars had, the one scoring drive that they had with 3 explosive plays in it, had Blake Cashman off the field. So he has been dealing with turf toe. That's what has held him out of these games. He plays the first series, and then the second drive, he is on the sideline. It looked like he was working it out. It looked like it was still bugging him. And so I kind of thought he was going to be out for the rest of the game. He comes back for the third series. He plays out the rest of the game. They figured it out. He, I think, was just, acclimated. Just needed a little bit of time to kind of get something resituated. Whatever that was, it was over by, before the end of the first quarter. So it is, I don't think, a coincidence that the one time the Jaguars offense had success was the time when Blake Cashman was out. But that sort of raises the question, doesn't it? Which is, why on earth does an off-ball linebacker have this much of an impact? That's not typical, right? We've seen all kinds of studies on positional values of off-ball linebackers. If you have poor play from your off-ball linebacker, it's far less impactful than poor play from an edge rusher or from a safety or whatever, right? Now that's all, on average in the large long-term aggregate of every team ever. So for the Vikings specifically, and honing in on what Cashman does for them, is where we'll find this answer. And so with his absence, what happens is the first question. It's either Kamu Grugier-Hill, who can be late to his gap sometimes, who is, I think, a reasonably good player, but not consistent enough. And that's probably the difference between him being a backup, which he is right now, and being, an every down starter, which he has been at points in his career. Or you're shuffling guys around to sort of recreate that job in the aggregate, right? So without Cashman there, if you don't want to put Kamu in, which apparently they're just not that high on, otherwise, they probably just would have played him there every down, and there you go. He's the backup. He fills in, plug and play. But they would rather either put Josh Metellus in there, and you would basically be in a dime package with 6 DBs, 1 linebacker in Ivan Pace, and then whatever you have on the D-line for the other the other 4 players, or maybe even the other 5 players. You'd be in dime. You wouldn't have Pace at all. And you'd have Metellus playing this sort of off-ball role, or it would be just Ivan Pace. It'd be a penny thing with, 1 off-ball linebacker or whatever. But you'd sort of, each personnel package would have its own little answer. So really what that boils down to is Metellus doing this job a lot. And I've been pretty critical of that because I think there's been a lot of mistakes born of that. Brian Flores went to bat for Metellus and said, there's no position he can't play. And I think that that's super true. And that is what makes him a great weapon for the Vikings. And while I've been critical of him in that role, I want to be super clear that that's a waste of a lot of his talent, maybe is a way to put that. Like, you're making him into a worse player, but maybe you still prefer that to having Kamu on the field or trying to put Asamoah on the field, who hasn't gotten any chance through any of this, and or any of the other things. But the other option that they did a lot of against the Colts, and it worked out really well, and they did a whole bunch of here against the Jaguars when Cashman was out, and it didn't work out as well, but clearly that's the option they feel like they found that they like, is to move Andrew Van Ginkel into that job and put Dallas Turner in. And they've been a lot happier with Dallas Turner. I think he did have a couple of blemishy moments in the Jags game, but also a couple of explosive ones to be expected from a rookie, right? But you probably are already aware that that's that's been the strategy. Either Metellus does it or Van Ginkel does it, and then we move around whatever we have to move around elsewhere. But that kind of does mean you've got, a slightly less reliable presence at edge rusher, because Van Ginkel's a more reliable player than Dallas Turner, which doesn't say too much about Dallas Turner. Gink's playing great. Or you have, an extra defensive back, so you have an extra size issue if you're doing the Metellus thing. You'll have somebody playing in a spot that they're maybe not so comfortable in too, whether that's Van Ginkel or Josh Metellus. And so the things that Cashman does are important to understand. So, for example, the way that the Vikings will fit a zone run is they'll have the off-ball linebackers stack up with the defensive tackles. So you basically line up right on the butt of the defensive tackle. He's going to be doubled, and you want it to essentially be unclear who needs to climb and who needs to stay on that guy. And usually that's decided by which shoulder the linebacker goes to. If he goes to the left, then the guy on the left gets him. If he goes on the right, then the guy on the right gets him. If he's in the middle, it's kind of hazy. You got to communicate now. And maybe the offensive line screws up and you can get something there. And meanwhile, he's basically stacking up and he's relating to the running back. That is something Cashman's really used to. I think anybody who plays off-ball linebacker, down to down, that's their living, is going to be pretty used to that sort of thing. If you're a defensive back, what does Metellus usually do on run plays? He's an overhang defender. He's shooting gaps. He's blitzing. He's being asked to do a number of different things, and that versatility is where the value lies. So he's trying to do the same thing over and over again. Here's the deal. I don't think Metellus is the best on the team at any given thing. Very jack of all trades, master of none. Is he the best man cover guy on the team? No, that's probably maybe Byron Murphy, maybe Gilmore when he's feeling it, right? Is he the best, block shedder in the game, in the field at any given time? No, that's probably might be Bullard, Jonathan Bullard. He's phenomenal at that. Harrison Phillips, Ivan Pace in a weird way. Is he the best, zone defender? No, probably not. He's not the best at any, but because he's pretty good at all those things, that gives him something that nobody else has. But if you have him do the same thing over and over again, now he's just a guy doing a thing kind of not that great. And that's not going to be the best use of him. So you kind of make Metellus worse, and you make the position of off-ball linebacker worse, and maybe you even make the edge rusher room worse if you have Van Ginkel, who has his deficiencies as well. But the main thing that really messed up the Vikings was in those zone drops, right? So Metellus, when he is lining up on the line of scrimmage and then dropping out into a zone, he has a really awesome backpedal. No, I shouldn't say backpedal. He's a really awesome bail technique. The way that he turns his hips, turns his feet, and gets himself going to where he needs to go, and then turns it back around and squares up where he's supposed to. There's this precision to it. He gets to where he's going quickly. His eyes are in the right place, and he can go make really cool plays. We've seen some really awesome plays this year from that. When he is just starting, 5 yards off the ball, and it's a little bit more of a controlled thing, and there's a little bit more time to think, I would argue that's an easier job, but one that kind of wastes that talent. And it's one that, because it's an easier job, the differentiation between a good player and a bad player is going to come down to more subtle details and experience that, it looks like he's a defensive back playing linebacker, That's all it is. He's a defensive back playing linebacker, and it's not just a size thing. I'm very glad to have Cashman back, because it means Metellus can go back to doing what he does best, which is everything. And I think if you're asking Metellus to do one thing all day, you're just never going to get that much value out of him versus what you can get, when you ask him to do everything. And obviously you can't unhurt Cashman. They had to do what they had to do. It wasn't a great solution, and hopefully they don't have to go back to it anytime soon. And Cashman's back. But all that shuffling, all that carousel, hopefully we can calm down on that a little bit and Cashman can come back. But you can kind of see how one player, it's not just that there's worse play at the off-ball linebacker position. It's that all these other values evaporate as well, and then suddenly the Vikings defense turns into a much more vanilla version of itself, and everybody gets to just draw up whatever they draw up in a preseason game, and you can move the ball. Hopefully we're through that come this Titans game, but we'll have lots of time later in the week to talk about that. For now, I want to get into Sam Darnold, cover 2, and all of the problems that plagued the Vikings offense in this one. That'll all be next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you want, you can get started by putting down $5 on anything you want, and you can get $150 back in bonus bets if that bet wins. Right now at FanDuel, the Vikings are favored by 5.5. The odds on that are -120, which is about as short as they will let the odds go before they move the line itself. I believe that actually just did move the other way. I think it was at 6.5 for a while, and now it's at 5.5. So as that fluctuates, check back with FanDuel, check on all of their promos and all their interesting little deals that they have for you, including the one that you can get through here, which is if you win your first $5 bet, no matter what it is, can be a super short odds money line like the Miami Dolphins, who are -390 to beat the Raiders. You can put it on that and get 30-1 on it, assuming that the Dolphins actually beat the Raiders, or that the Detroit Lions beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's -770, but you can get 30-1 on it if you win. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks, which is daily fantasy made easy. I've been having a ton of fun on PrizePicks. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 of your favorite players, whether they'll do better or worse than their PrizePicks projection. You slam them all into one lineup, and if you get it all right, you can win up to 100 times your money. It is a much more flexible way of playing daily fantasy. You just do what you're confident in, and you don't have to worry about spreading it out across all the positions. You can do 4 quarterbacks if that's what your wee little heart desires. You can do all tight ends. Whatever, it's fine. You can do all kickers. The world is your oyster over there at PrizePicks. PrizePicks has been kind of my main squeeze this year, so I've been having all kinds of fun. Can't recommend it enough. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you can get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. Run your game. Thanks a million for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. As I record this, I'm uploading a Patreon episode about Sam Darnold. So if you want to go to patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL and get some of the film on what I'm about to talk about, some of the visual proof, I'll show my work there. If you're interested in that, you want to check up on me or whatever, go check out patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. But let's get into the Sam Darnold of it all. So I felt like my take, you could tell maybe as I was recording my hotel room Monday episode, that my live eye was maybe telling me too simplistic of a picture. I felt it. I could maybe think. And I would probably say, yeah, there's a little more nuance to it than I was led to believe, but I think I still probably hold to my original take, which is that the Vikings offense wasn't that bad. Sam Darnold himself was at the root of a lot of problems. And so in looking through the tape and making that video and breaking down a whole bunch of things, here's where I guess I'm at with this Darnold game. This one was a bad one. And I've gone through other games that I thought were bad, and then they kind of turned out to be like, you had to make whatever piece you make with the turnovers and then look at all the rest of the plays and realize that they were all really good. And I don't know what you do with that, right? You've got 25 really good dropbacks and 3 interceptions. It's like, well, 3 interceptions is a terrible game. What do you do with a 3 interception game? But you can't ignore that, 25 out of 28 reps were really, really good. how do you deal with that? And I guess that's all in the eye of the beholder. But that was kind of where I was at with Darnold. Not this one. This one didn't have, I mean, it had some good moments, but it didn't have the like slew of redeeming awesomeness that kind of makes you keep buying back into Sam Darnold. So I didn't like this game in a more genuine sense than the other games where you go, yeah, I liked it, but the turnovers, and you kind of have to leave it at that. You can't, like, it would be wrong to just call that then an average game or call it like a bad game anyway, because you'd always feel like you were oversimplifying. So what was wrong then? I mean, mechanically, I didn't see anything that looked wrong. It didn't look like he was hurt to me or anything like that. It didn't look like he was playing under any different circumstances than he's used to. You know, sometimes there was pressure, sometimes a pocket would squeeze on him, but that happened in the other games too, and he was able to get the ball away. And I think some of the time that pocket squeezes on you, and like, that's the NFL, and you kind of just have to put up with that the way you put up with that. So if it wasn't mechanics, and I don't think it was pressure, or at least pressure would be a flimsy excuse. Maybe you could excuse a little bit of the like ball placement stuff and say, oh, he couldn't quite step into that one the way he did. But in the NFL, I think you kind of just have to put up with that. Like, that's the way it is. You don't get perfect pockets all the time. You have to be able to thrive in that situation as an NFL quarterback. I think there were more miscommunications in this one, and small time miscommunications, not full on. You like cut the route off and I thought you were going to keep running kind of stuff, but more, I thought you were going to widen that a little more, so I put it a little bit more behind you than I would have. And then just some ball placement issues, just some not really feeling it. And I use that, I'm going to use a lot of vague language here because I think that the issue is a vague one. It is, at least in this game, the rhythm was just kind of off. The chemistry with his receivers was just kind of off. The ball placement was just kind of off. The decisions were different than what he usually does. And maybe it was just a week of lapse in focus or something like that. And I mean that in the most minuscule way, right? The tiniest little space out can cause you to make a decision that's totally baffling. And it's so easy for me to say as I like scrub through and really look at it and say, okay, after frame by framing, I think this was it's super easy for me to say, right? But one little lapse in focus for a split second and you can start making bad decisions. And I think that this was one where that happened. Hey, look, you're in Florida. It's kind of halfway rainy out. You know, your footing might not be the same. It didn't actually rain in that game really, but it did sprinkle enough where like I could imagine there being some discomfort with the footing, but not so much where you feel like you have to go change cleats or something, but just enough to like throw off your like mojo. And so the problem feels very vague to me. And maybe that's my way of coping with the fact that the problem is like fourfold. Like he just missed a lot of passes. I do want to revisit the interception that was supposed to be to Justin Jefferson in the middle of the end zone, the one that probably should have been overturned. That I thought that was just like a bad throw, that the throw got away from him. I think it was more, it was very late in the down. Darnold had gone through his entire progression. By the way, that was the one where Aaron Jones was like streaking way wide open. I think he was actually the first read on that play. And when he was supposed to be breaking open, he was getting jammed to heck. He was getting absolutely pummeled. So Darnold moved off of him and absolutely had to, and then just didn't like come all the way back to him, which when you're doing like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 read, once you get through that, you should see the whole field. So we can still critique him for not seeing that, but I think that's important context. But I digress. When you're that late in the down, you're through the whole progression, but because the pass pro was actually just destroying, I think they only had the 3-man rush, but they were killing it. So you had forever. He had time to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then like still have time to think more and try to figure out what was going to happen and didn't have to bail. So usually when you go into scramble drills, it's very easy to figure out which way you're supposed to work, right? You work with the way the quarterback is working, but if the quarterback isn't working one way or another, then you don't know where you're supposed to go. And I think Darnold was expecting Justin Jefferson to come back toward him, like just super dart, like right back toward him, and he would probably catch it on the goal line. Whereas Jefferson was just kind of picked a direction. So I don't know what you're supposed to do in that situation. And I think it was clear that they also had some confusion about what to do in that situation. They got to iron that out. But those are the kinds of miscommunications, right? It wasn't, staple stuff. It's not, oh, you ran choice away. I didn't expect you to break. You went left. I thought you were going right, and I threw an interception. Like that Jalen Reagor play in the 33-0 Colts game a couple years ago, where he just broke off a different direction than Cousins thought he was going to. And it was like, okay, that's like a fairly existential thing for you with this staple route, which is, no, this is like, okay, so next time that I don't have to bail out of the pocket, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in my progression, and also we're in the red zone. Like, this is very specific niche thing that, like, of course you haven't had that conversation yet, but now you will have had it. And if that does come up again, hopefully you can fix it. So it's like that kind of stuff. So does this get fixed? I don't know, because I really do think it's like, I'm chalking it up to like a weird mojo thing. Maybe it was the weather, maybe it was the time zone, maybe it was just how the week was structured. Something was different, something threw him off. But like, eyes on it, man. Like, if he shows up against Tennessee and Chicago, these next two teams both have good defenses. So if you go through these next two games and you're just super off and you're throwing a million turnover worthy plays and you can't put the ball on it, then like, we got a problem. And I don't know if it's a solvable one. But if he can pull out of that funk and at least just like do what he's supposed to do and start executing on time again and kind of bounce it back, then we can just write this one off as, all right, off one for Sam Darnold. Glad we won it anyways, and we can all move on. But really the thing that interested me more was how the Vikings attacked the Jaguars defense, which is this very samey thing, this very, like, they live in kind of their own island, which I respect about them. And how the Vikings tried and failed in a lot of places to attack that is also really fascinating. So I'm going to explain what I'm talking about there next. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Ultimate Pro Football GM. You remember those guys? The phone app where you can basically play as a GM. You can put on, you can do your free agency, you can do draft, you can figure out your contracts, figure out how to optimize your team, go win a bunch of Super Bowls. Well, now they have head coach mode, so you can actually call plays in the games as well. So if you think you can do that better than Kevin O'Connell, if you think you can draft better than Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, go do it on your phone, right there on the toilet where you're going to be doing this. I know that's where you're going to be doing this. Don't lie. You don't have to lie to me. Here's a special offer for Locked On fans. You can use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all caps, inside the game store and receive a free boost to your franchise. Make sure you get it because this perk will jumpstart your play and give you the advantage you'll want in creating a dynasty. Ultimate Pro Football GM is completely free. It has no ads and it's 100% playable offline. So you can play in airplane mode or on the toilet, where I know you're going to be playing this. Download the game. You can visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. Once again, that's ultimate-gm.com, or just look up Pro Football GM, Ultimate Pro Football GM on the app stores. Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Moving right along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast, let's talk about cover two. Let's talk about too high, two man. So the Jaguars were a very interesting test for the Vikings, and I don't know if they offensively passed it because so many things that were like I had kind of chalked up to Sam Darnold and Sam Darnold alone were maybe wrong. There's one play that I think is really indicative of this. It was probably should have been a touchdown to Jalen Nailor. It was one where he kind of was diving for it and right in the middle of the end zone. He couldn't get it, if you remember that play. That one came on Dagger, of all things, right? Hey, you're going to throw cover two at us. We're going to throw everything that everybody else is throwing at our cover two. So on Dagger, the way the Vikings run it, this is also the same play they called on the interception that Darnold threw behind Justin Jefferson against the Colts. Same play call. And the first read on that play call is called a through route, where if it is two high safeties, which was there, you basically turn it into a post, you split those safeties. And Nailor ran kind of splitting where the safeties usually are instead of where the safeties actually were. And Darnold threw that ball splitting where the safeties actually were. So it's, again, that kind of minor stuff. But to me, that's the receiver running it at the wrong width. And Darnold putting the ball where it's supposed to be, trusting his receiver can chase it down, and then not having that trust paid back. Obviously, there's pressure issues that were, I would say, there, but not concerning. I mean, like, some pressure is to be expected every game, right? So I don't think it was super concerned. I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I'm not going to worry too much about them. But I think there were, a lot of timing issues in this game. Routes weren't breaking off with the precision that they usually do. You can usually look at a Vikings passing play and tell what the progression is supposed to be based on when those routes are breaking off, right? One breaks, then two breaks, then three breaks, then four breaks. And a lot of times it goes left to right super easily there. And you can watch Sam Darnold's eyes do it. Like, it's very easy to tell what they're supposed to be doing. There's no ambiguity. There's no confusion. There's no, wait, wasn't he supposed to be there? Wouldn't it make more sense? No, everything is very clear and defined. But not in this one. You had deep routes breaking off before short routes. The timing was all off. The drops maybe were not at the right speed. So things were like all messed up. But I digress. The Jags are a cover 2 team. They're either playing cover 2 or 2-man most of the time. Sometimes they'll throw some quarters at you. Sometimes they'll throw some blitz looks in cover 1, and they mix in as much of that stuff as anybody. But 2-man is like their identity. And then just playing like country, like vanilla cover 2, and sometimes the underneath zones will like deepen a little more with a vertical stem, which the Vikings actually attacked that tendency of theirs. I don't even want to call it a tendency, that cover 2 coaching point of theirs quite a bit by trying to deepen out and then run something behind it. A lot of those TJ Hawkinson third downs worked because of that idea where it wasn't even a clear out. You just have like a deep route, a corner or a basic or something that's got a 10 to 15 yard stem that backs off an underneath defender because in cover 2, Here's the exploitable thing about all cover 2. The way that cover 2 safety is taught is, for the most part, that safety has to get on the moon, get on the roof. You cannot let anything behind you because you are the last line of defense, right? So you would rather that safety be 40 yards deep, and even if something is getting caught 35 yards gain, right in front of him, you'd rather than be 40 yards deep. And then what that allows all the underneath defenders to do is never worry about anything deep. My safety's got me. I'm playing underneath this. And then so every man coverage rep, like, you get to tell all your corners, okay, play man coverage and don't worry about getting beat deep. Only worry about everything else. That is so much easier because so many of the things that a receiver does, especially a receiver like Jefferson, tries to sell you on this is a go route. Everything is a go until it isn't. That is like an old wide receiver adage. I forget who originally said it, but everything's a go until it isn't. Well, for a corner, it can be a go for as long as you want it to be. It can really be a go. I don't care. There's a safety behind me that's going to pick that up. So I just need to make sure that you don't break left or right or underneath on me. And that's so much easier to play against man coverage. So that's why 2-man is such a powerful thing. It's really my favorite coverage. I love 2-man, and I love that about the Jaguars in particular. And it allows you to press more aggressively. It allows you to play trail position more aggressively. It wasn't 2-man, but Byron Murphy, I don't think it was 2-man, but I think it was quarters. Byron Murphy's interception in this game came on very similar logic, where I think they did have a half safety. He had a safety over the top of him bracketing a route vertically. So Murphy could sit right underneath that route. I think it was Gabe Davis, could sit right underneath Gabe Davis, and it did not matter what Gabe Davis did. He can head fake in or out or deep or try to stutter or do whatever. Murphy knows that whatever this route is, I have the underneath of it, so I'm going to stay under him. And then, you turn around, ball's in your chest, you get the interception. That is the great thing about cover 2. But to do that, that means safeties need to be on the moon. They backpedal really aggressively, really hard right away every time. They have to. They're supposed to. They're coached to. They have to. And that means that to attack it, you want to force that to happen, right? The only time a cover 2 safety won't just totally open up and blow the, and raise the roof of this whole coverage is if there are no vertical stems to his side, right? You don't want to just be covering grass. So then he'll stay there and he won't be going, he won't go do anything crazy until someone starts going vertical to his side. And his eyes will start reading the quarterback and maybe he makes a play, right? So if you give a vertical route over there to ensure that both of these safeties are going to do something. So clear outs on the outside. This was like Josh Oliver ran a bunch of these. Naylor ran a bunch of these. Jefferson ran a bunch of these, just to make sure that they've all got, insurance that they're going to do their thing. They're going to go get really deep. And then that opens a whole bunch of room where if you do have a linebacker playing underneath, well, now he has to feel a window. And if you can get 10 yards deeper than him anyways, you're going to have a huge window to throw. And the Vikings tried to take advantage of that a lot. There are a lot of cover 2 beaters. A lot of other things will kind of take advantage of the 5-man structure they have at the bottom. For example, the flat defender will perhaps, have to midpoint between a low route and a high route. And you can maybe attack that. You can maybe try to clear out a zone defender and then run another route right underneath him. This is how the Vikings run choice. They got TJ Hawkinson on a beautiful one on one of the third downs using that idea. And I think they got a lot of really good looks against cover 2. So my concern going in was, can a team look at what the Jags did and say, okay, that's what I'm going to do? And I think that if they did, it would be a pretty good idea. You got to have some brass ones a little bit, because sometimes it means you're going to have somebody cover Jefferson one-on-one. And Tyson Campbell, I think, did an admirable job doing that, especially considering he didn't have to worry about deep. But that can be a little spooky. But they could not cover Addison unless they just wanted to hold him, and that's, you're asking for a penalty, right? I think they got away with, they did a good job of towing the line of exactly what they could and couldn't get away with, the Jags did. But obviously it's a dangerous game if that's going to be your game plan, and they couldn't deal with Hawkinson or Oliver. They gave up 130 yards to tight ends, right? So I don't think that it quite worked. And a lot of the problems that happened were those little kind of detailed things, or just Sam Darnold's brain kind of falling out, being slow to the read, or, misplacing the ball, or what have you, right? So, yeah, there are offensive concerns that I do think carry into next week. But if they don't happen the same way again next week, I immediately drop these concerns. I need to kind of see them to believe them. But my mind is open to it. I guess that's where I land on this. So tomorrow, we're going to talk to Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans. He is very down on the Titans, so that should be a very interesting conversation. And then, of course, on Friday, we'll do this over-under and the bold predictions and everything we all love. So I will see you all for that. And as always, Skull.